Welcome to Murder Mile UK True Crime. This isn't a video, it's an audio experience. The only images you'll need for this episode are these. So close your eyes, open your mind, and savour the sounds of Murder Mile.
First of May 2023, Bristol bus station in the southwest of England. 73-year-old David Groves casually strolls amongst the mums, kids and elderly, all rightfully oblivious to this tall, vague pensioner. With grey hair, a goatee and glasses, a waterproof jacket, grey jogging bottoms and comfortable trainers, he visits the doctors, buys a paper, sips a coffee, chats politely, and then like everyone else, he heads home. Only home since 2017 has been HMP Leyhill in Gloucestershire, a Category D, low-security men's open prison. Housing low-risk prisoners and offenders nearing the end of their sentence, it has been praised for its rehabilitation of convicts as they attempt to rejoin society by providing counselling, training and day release. They even won an award at the Chelsea Flower Show, which is ironic given its most infamous inmate. David Groves is the UK's longest-serving continuous prisoner. Sentenced on Friday the 21st of November 1975 to life with a minimum of 20 years for the brutal murders of 84-year-old Isabella Griffith, 89-year-old Adele Price and 64-year-old priest Father Anthony Crean. He has been described as sick, twisted, sadistic and cruel. He has never shown any remorse. His name is often spoken in the same breath as the Yorkshire Ripper and the Moors murderers, and being dubbed as one of Britain's worst serial killers. Since his teens, he has been diagnosed by psychiatrists as a cold, psychopathic killer. Trapped in a cycle of parole rejection, he's the killer nobody wants to release. And although his lawyers fought to get him committed to Broadmoor due to diminished responsibility, being declared sane, he knew his crimes were evil as he wasn't mentally unwell, but had a severe psychopathic personality disorder. David Groves was known as the Monster of Belgravia and the Devil's Disciple, yet his real name is far more infamous. Being a psychotic killer who terrorised elderly ladies of 1970s London, and although convicted of those 3 murders, he confessed and was suspected of as many as 11, making him possibly one of Britain's most prolific serial killers in his 2-year spree. But what's the truth? Patrick MacKay, Two Sides of a Psychopath, Part A. MacKay's psychopathic personality was formed in an adolescence of neglect, abuse and trauma. Born in 1952 in Park Royal, West London, he was raised in Dartford, Kent, to a violent and drunken Scottish father and a battered Guyanese mother, being witness and victim to assaults like it was part of a normal life. With no good role model to shape his malleable brain, MacKay bullied the weakest. He stole for thrills. He was lonely, abandoned, and lashed out in cruel violence. And although his education was broken by stints in Borstal, young offenders institutes and mental institutions, he spoke well, he was intelligent, he had a passion for words and storytelling, and a patience to collect stamps and make airfix models. He was bright, bored, angry, and seen as an underachiever, diagnosed as a psychopath aged 11. His early life became a repetitive catalogue of pointlessness, cruelty, sadism, and attention-seeking. On the 15th of August 1972, 20-year-old MacKay left Moss Side Psychiatric Hospital in Liverpool for the final time. Being discharged against doctors' wishes, he was unable to live with his widowed mother in Gravesend, Kent. So moving to London, he slept in hostels, and in his own words, "I virtually spent a year on the bottle," necking half a bottle of vodka and 8 to 10 pints of beer a night. And as a casual user of amphetamines and cannabis, his memory and judgment was clouded by what he called a white mist. The nearest thing he had to family was an auntie in Catford, one in Wandsworth, her friend Vi and Bert Cowdrey, who were like his surrogate parents, and an ex-social worker in East Finchley, Reverend Ted Breck. MacKay was always broke, homeless, lost, and unable to hold down a job for more than a few days. Like in February 1973, being hired as a cutter serviceman at Imperial Paper Mills. He was fired having only turned up twice, meaning his report card was marked with the words, "Waste of time, a split personality." He was convicted that season of 3 petty crimes. The burglary of a tobacconist in Greenhithe, where he stole cigars and cigarettes. A grocer's in Dartford, having nicked 3 tins of old oak ham and some Easter eggs because he was hungry. And in May 1973, in a theft that would lead to his capture, he stole a cheque from Father Crean, the man he would later murder, and was given a 2-year conditional discharge. It was all very petty and pointless. Then 2 months later, it is said, he committed his first murder. Terrorising the wealthier parts of West London, across Chelsea and Belgravia, MacKay committed a series of muggings and robberies on lone elderly widows. Later gaining entry to their homes using charm, carrying their shopping, or asking for a glass of water. Most he stole from, but at least 2, Isabella Griffith and Adele Price, he brutally murdered in a powerful short burst of violent rage, some of which he could recall vividly, other parts which were patchy, possibly due to drink, drugs, mania or shame, followed by a long period of self-hatred and depression, often culminating in a suicide attempt. On Saturday the 6th of April 1975, after his arrest for Father Crean's murder, and with a fingerprint found on a teaspoon in the burgled home of Margaret Diver, Detective Superintendent John Bland didn't think much of MacKay. A drunk, a junkie, a loser, who stole to feed his habit, had gone too far by killing a priest in a rage, who was currently awaiting trial for stealing old ladies' handbags, and now a murder. On Thursday the 17th of April, in Brixton Prison, DS Bland expected a no-comment reply to his questions about the spate of muggings of old ladies in the West End. But MacKay was forthcoming. He openly admitted to 2 murders the police hadn't connected. Of Adele Price, he calmly said,
"Yes, I did that,"
providing provable details which hadn't been made public. And of Isabella Griffith,
"Yeah, I did that,"
with DS Bland recalling,
he seemed relieved that at last he was telling someone what he'd done.
But this was not the end of his murderous confession. MacKay sighed and said,
"All I want to do is to be frank and honest. But before I start, I've got another murder I want to get off my mind. The only trouble is, I don't know whether he drowned or not. I threw a vagrant off Hungerford Bridge in Waterloo, and I saw the water open him up and take him."
It wasn't until 1988 that it was standard police procedure to record all interviews, so that confession was only inscribed in a notebook. Taken to Cannon Road Police Station to make a written statement, on Tuesday the 22nd of April, although DS Bland had heard word that when asked why he was in prison, MacKay had bragged to the other prisoners in the hospital wing,
"Because I killed 11 people.
Some he would confess to, some he was suspected of, 3 he was convicted of, 2 he was charged with, and others matched a series of unsolved London murders, many of which mirrored his method and his motive. Detective Chief Superintendent Bill Ramsey, who headed up the investigation, stated,
"It will be at least a week before we can establish if his confession is genuine."
But with 3 of the 11, Adele Price, Isabella Griffiths and Father Anthony Crean, later proved with so little doubt that even MacKay's own defence team didn't contest it. The other 8 that MacKay was either suspected of or confessed to were Heidi Mnilk, Mary Hines, Stephanie Britton, Christopher Martin, the unnamed homeless man, Leslie Goodman, Sarah Rodmell, and Ivy Davies, many of whom may have been his first fledgling foray into murder. So if he had murdered 11 people, not 3, was his first killing Heidi Mnilk? Heidi Anne-Marie Mnilk was born on the 12th of November 1955 in Kassel, West Germany. A small but cultural university city, being home to the Brothers Grimm and one of Europe's most palatial gardens. And as the only child of her father Bruno, who was invalided in the war, his daughter was his everything. Described as blonde, pretty and slim, although a 17-year-old who caught many a man's eye, in truth she wasn't cocky or brash, but pleasant, shy and quiet. And having saved up her wage as a pharmaceutical apprentice, not as no pair as most sources state. On the 22nd of July 1973, Heidi and her friend Doris Thoreau arrived in London on a 2-week coach trip. And said to be nice young women, they shared a back bedroom in the bed and breakfast of travel agent Bob and Pauline Isaacson in West Wickham in Kent. Sunday the 8th of July 1973 was a typically British summer's day, being cold, wet and cloudy. As a keen photographer, Heidi joined her coach of German sightseers at 9 a.m, taking photos of Big Ben, Piccadilly Circus, Buckingham Palace, and in the afternoon the girls went shopping in Oxford Street and Soho. Heidi was impossible to lose amongst the throng of commuters and shoppers. As stylishly dressed in red flared slacks, a red cotton top, a red handbag, black shoes, and a blue and white 3/4 length houndstooth check jacket with a bare midriff. Even if she snuck away to take some snaps, you couldn't miss her. At 4:50 p.m, having seen the sights, Heidi and Doris entered Charing Cross station on the Strand. And on platform 2, they boarded the 4:57 train to Hayes, using their return tickets to West Wickham. But as Doris wanted to smoke, and Heidi passionately disliked the smell, Doris recalled, "That is why we split on the train. I went to the smoker's compartment in the middle, and Heidi into the non-smoker." As an old-fashioned Class 201 to 207 thumpers train, with 8 to 10 BR Mark I coaches painted in a rich maroon livery, the smoking coaches comprised of 7 to 8 private compartments, with 6 seats and a sliding door, accessed by a corridor up the right-hand side or its own door to the platform. Whereas the non-smoking carriages had no corridor. The only way to access each private compartment was via the platform door, meaning that if Heidi got into any trouble, none of the 40 people on board in her 1/4 full coach could get into her compartment until the train had stopped in the station, making it a hotspot for muggings and assaults, which tourists like Heidi wouldn't have been aware of. At 4:57 p.m, the train departed Charing Cross, with Heidi sitting in the left-hand window seat facing front, and as far as we know, no one else was in her compartment as it headed to London Bridge. At 5:06 p.m. precisely, it departed London Bridge Station and headed to its next stop, New Cross. So by 5:08 p.m, just 90 seconds later, it had picked up speed and was 1 mile out. In the next private compartment sat 2 boys, Andrew Lee, aged 17, and Stephen Arnold, 16, of Catford. They recalled, "There was nothing unusual until just past London Bridge. No shouting, no thuds. Then suddenly, there were some screams coming from the compartment behind. Said to last around 20 seconds. It sounded like a young woman's voice. We thought there was just horseplay going on. But there wasn't. Suddenly, although the train was moving fast, the carriage door opened in the next compartment. I saw this sort of red thing flapping about. It just hung there for a few moments. A bright flailing blur against a flash of grey as the train thundered faster. Then it fell onto the tracks. By then, the screams had stopped. Crashing hard onto the steel rails. At first, they thought someone had lost their luggage. But as it rounded the bend, there was a mop of something resembling hair. It could have been a body. Passing Abbey Street Bridge in Bermondsey, Stephen recalled, "A man appeared at our window, up to his waist, and peering into their compartment from the outside of this speeding train. I could see him clearly. He was leaning out, and he looked at me. His hair was blown back by the force of the wind, and he had this little smirk on his face, as if he was saying, 'Oh, it's all good fun, isn't it, chaps?' But until the train had stopped 6 minutes later, there was nothing that anyone could do." At 5:14 p.m, the train pulled into New Cross station. The boys recalled, "He got out. He was near enough for us to grab him. He hitched up his trousers and just stands there, looking at the two of us. It seemed like hours, but it must have been seconds. And then he turned and fled through the ticket barrier." No one stopped him, as his return ticket to New Cross was valid, and nobody else on board had heard a thing. The boys checked the next compartment, which was empty. They reported it to the station staff, stating, "That man's just thrown a girl off a train." But suspecting a prank, senior trainman Uriah Johnson dismissed it and ordered the train onwards. The boys boarded it. And Heidi's killer wasn't reported until the boys got home to Catford Bridge and rang the police. But they didn't believe us either. A passing train spotted her body and reported it, but not before she'd been hit by several others. Pathologist Professor Arthur Mant stated, "Cuts on her hands showed she'd struggled. Injuries to her face and possible strangulation suggested she may have been unconscious when she was thrown from the train, and with the cause of death being a single stab wound to the neck and chest, which pierced her jugular vein and left little blood in the carriage. She was killed using a 5-inch kitchen knife with a brown handle, matching a bloody blade found 600 feet from the body 2 days later." Detective Chief Inspector Tom Parry of Tower Bridge Police Station and DCS Bill Ramsey, who would later head up the investigation into Mackay's confession, also investigated the murder of Heidi Mnilk. It was well covered by the press. A reconstruction appeared on Police 5. 80,000 statements were taken. 20,000 premises were visited. But it remained hindered as 30 of those 40 passengers didn't come forward. With the train only identified later that day, the slightly bloodied compartment had already been used by as many as 30 commuters in the intervening hours, meaning the crime scene was contaminated and no fingerprints were found, just as none were found on the knife to connect it to a viable suspect. It was described as a motiveless crime on a young lone woman. Detectives ruled out robbery as her handbag, purse and gold chain hadn't been stolen, and although her expensive houndstooth jacket was missing, it could have been taken by the killer, or a passenger, or misplaced in lost property. Sexual assault was dismissed, and although it may have been a failed rape, revenge couldn't be proven. Detective Sergeant Prendergast said the man who exited the train at New Cross Station was definitely a local, as all the tickets collected were for that station, and he was seen exiting the turnstile through a tunnel underneath the railway track. Only a local would know about that. Oddly, the next stop after New Cross was Catford Bridge, where the boys got off, and Patrick MacKay was living with his auntie. The boys gave a very detailed description of Heidi's killer, who they'd seen twice in broad daylight from just a few feet away. He was described as 5'6", mid-40s, pointed chin, a thin face, with dark greasy swept-back hair.
And his face looked like an Arab, or as if he wasn't shaved.
He was wearing tatty clothes,
A black and dark ill-fitting jacket and trousers, and possibly a red or blue checked shirt. And he appeared to be squinting. He had narrow eyes, as if he had bad eyesight.
and with the photo fit published in the newspapers, Tom Herbert, an ex-docker who lodged with Mackay's aunts in Cadford, positively recognised it as him. On the second day of the investigation, police interviewed Patrick MacKay, a local drunk with a history of petty theft. But as back then, assaulting women wasn't his MO, he was released without charge. So had the police released a fledgling killer to kill again? Mackay was a likely suspect. He knew London well. He was local. He rode that same train route to visit his mother in Gravesend, and he admitted to carrying knives. Based on the killings he was convicted of, Adele Price, Isabella Griffith, and Father Anthony Crean, there were similarities with Heidi's murder. As little or nothing was stolen, she was killed with a single stab to the neck or chest, and the knife was casually disposed of, as if the killing meant nothing to him, or he wanted it found. But then there are dissimilarities which don't match his known method or motive. As his provable victims were mostly lone elderly widows, many of whom were wealthy, not young women who could fight back. He often attacked in houses and behind locked doors, but then he also struck on the streets or doorsteps. And what is a train's compartment if it's not a locked and private space? And although he used knives, he also attacked with a bayonet and an axe, with some victims being stabbed, strangled, or bludgeoned. With Mackay, nothing is ever consistent. And if this was his first killing, was he finding his feet? 5 months before Heidi's murder, a similar attack occurred on the same train line in February 1973. With a traumatic tale retold at Southwark Coroner's Court, a middle-aged blonde Danish woman known only as Mrs. A said she got on at Waterloo, the stop between Charing Cross and London Bridge, and as with Heidi, a man had entered her non-smoking private compartment and sat opposite her. They chatted pleasantly at first, as was Mackay's habit. He then asked,
"Are you German?"
which he wasn't, but Heidi was. With rage he spat,
"I hate all Germans, especially women,"
and pulled out a 5-inch kitchen knife with a rivet missing in the handle, identical to the one reported in the press as used by Heidi's killer. He had a dreadful hate. I thought he was going to stab me, so I kept him talking. He spoke about Spain, Toronto, roses, art, and he was taking a refresher course in catering to become a chef. And as the train pulled into London Bridge Station, she seized the moment and fled for her life. His description was remarkably similar to the man suspected of killing Heidi. And she added, he had a terrible smell of oil and boiled onions. His shoes were spattered with fat, like he worked at a burger stall. His face was badly pockmarked, his hands were filthy, his hair greasy, and he seemed to squint. After an in-depth investigation which lasted 15 months, on the 30th of October 1974, Dr. Arthur Davies of Southwark Coroner's Court declared,
"The killer of Heidi Mnilk was a man with a paranoid hatred of German women,"
and said to be a maniac. It was determined she was murdered by persons unknown. It's a case which remains unsolved to this day. But did it mark Patrick Mackay's first failure to kill? Heidi's attack wasn't unique. The train line was synonymous with assaults on women to such an extent that the carriages were dubbed the cattle cars. So by the 1990s, open-plan carriages had become standard. On the 12th of February 1974, a man, early 30s, unkempt, Mediterranean appearance with black brushback hair, exposed himself to a woman on a train travelling between Catford and Waterloo. He was armed with a knife. We know it wasn't MacKay, as although single, his crimes lacked any sexual element. On the 30th of September 1973, 2 months after Heidi's murder, the raped and strangled body of 16-year-old Jacqueline Jones was found beside a railway line by Spicer's Wharf near Chelsea Bridge. But again, MacKay wasn't a rapist, and he rarely attacked the young, instead choosing lone and elderly women. On the 1st of August 1975, Wendy Hall was attacked in a private compartment on the 4:09 p.m. train to Sutton in South London. Stabbed 4 times in the neck, back and chest, her attacker stole £1, and she survived by pulling the emergency cord. It matched an attack on a 60-year-old woman travelling from Victoria to Balham, with a man's face described, as Mrs. A had, as being heavily pockmarked. Only MacKay's skin wasn't pockmarked. And on the 4th of January 1977, Kim Taylor was attacked on the 4:58 p.m. train from Norwood to London Bridge. She was stabbed 3 times in the shoulder and chest and survived by pulling the comms cord. Detectives stated,
"This stabbing appears to have all the hallmarks of the others in the last 18 months. We believe the same maniac is responsible, but we have not been able to link it to the murder of Heidi Mnilk."
And by that time, MacKay had been in prison for 2 years. 2 possible suspects were Alan Peary, the Bexleyheath rapist, who from 1968 to 1985 attacked young lone women on trains on that same route or as they walked home. Or Andreas Dimidios, a knife-wielding paranoid schizophrenic who attacked Anne Clements in May 1973 on a train between Clapham and Battersea Park. Later convicted of a boy's murder, he remains locked up in Broadmoor. There were many crimes that were similar and many possible suspects. But only one of them had confessed to Heidi's killing: Patrick MacKay. MacKay confessed,
"I killed 11 people.
With Heidi possibly being his first. But when the police dug deeper into his life, his upbringing and his motives, the evidence didn't stack up to his boastful claims. The photo fit of Heidi's attacker, as produced by the boys who saw him in broad daylight from a few feet away, described him as 5'6", mid-40s, pointed chin, oval face, with dark greasy swept-back hair and squinting like he had bad eyesight. Mrs. A, the Dutch woman, also stated that it matched her attacker. But Patrick MacKay was 23, so 20 years younger, 6'2", so half a foot taller. His face wasn't pockmarked and thin, but clean and oval. And although Tom Herbert, who lodged at MacKay's auntie's house, stated that the photo fit matched Patrick MacKay, it can't have done, as they looked totally different. When MacKay confessed to 11 murders, he never mentioned Heidi by name. As why would he know a random stranger's name? And when he confessed to the proven killing of Isabella Griffith, he asked,
"Do you mean Cheney Walk? Yeah, I did that."
As it was the killing's details that sparked his memory. When quizzed about Heidi's murder, many details he had gleaned from the newspapers as its coverage was front-page news for months. But when asked to recount the events, as he could in vivid detail in the 3 killings he was convicted of, MacKay's memory was often mistaken and sketchy, stating,
"From what I was told, she was stabbed once in the throat and flung from a speeding train."
But when he was asked about what was stolen from Heidi, he knew nothing about her missing houndstooth jacket. Detective Chief Superintendent Bill Ramsey later commented,
"We are not satisfied that he was the killer, as a key clue was the disappearance of Heidi's raincoat. He showed he knew nothing about this."
It wasn't the first time he'd potentially lied for his own gain, as when police investigated the possible drowning of the homeless man by MacKay on Hungerford Bridge, although he'd stated,
"I heaved him over. The water sprayed up. He started splashing as though he couldn't swim. I didn't care if he sank or not."
Of the 3 bodies washed up that day, none matched the detailed description of the man or could be attributed to MacKay. So was he confused, lying, drunk, or was the truth too impossible to prove? An ID parade was held at Brixton Prison. Stephen and Andrew, the boys who had seen Heidi's killer, failed to pick him out, as did Mrs. A, the Dutch lady. Yet Detective Sergeant Prendergast would later query if her tale about being attacked by Heidi's killer was even true, as many of the details she spoke of had clearly been taken from the news coverage, and some of the details, it later transpired, were lies. Several of the officers who interviewed MacKay referred to him as an inveterate liar, with D.I. Hart stating,
"He lies about trivial matters, even when it's unnecessary. Telling lies is part of his way of life."
So when MacKay went to court charged with murder, he withdrew all 8 of those additional killings he confessed to. He was convicted of 3 murders, all provable without a shred of doubt in a court of law, and which his defence team wouldn't contest owing to the weight of evidence. And yet, of those 8 killings he'd confessed to, 2 of them were strong enough for him to be charged with and to be used in evidence against him. So was MacKay mistaken when he confessed to Heidi's murder? As if he didn't kill her, why did he lie? Part B of Patrick MacKay, 2 Sides of a Psychopath, continues next week, with parts 1 to 4 covering in detail the killings of Father Crean, Isabella Griffith and Adele Price, as well as MacKay's life, crimes and trial, available now as part of this crossover series with the True Crime Enthusiast podcast.